all-wheel drive applied to motorcycles to make a faster off-road machine. And we join the ranks of rallying enthusiasts competing in the historic cars of the 60s.
Hello and welcome to this week's Top Gear. We're at the Jim Russell Racing School at Donington Park, one of several such schools around the country whose aim in life, at least in part anyway, is to find the next Nigel Mansell or Ayrton Senna. The Jim Russell School has its own celebrated list of graduates that includes our own Tiffany Dell. The pupils come from all over the world, of course, but there's a real pleasure in finding a British driver to challenge at the top because a real gap has opened up. This year at Formula One, for example, there are only 3 regular British drivers compared with half a dozen Frenchmen and about 14 Italians. So later in the programme, we'll be looking at schemes to do something about that, to raise the standard of driving talent to equal that of British management and British design at Formula One level. But we start tonight with people carriers. It was the evergreen Volkswagen microbus that really started the trend towards these large family cars that aren't quite minibuses some 40 years ago. But things really changed with the Renault Espace, the first purpose-built people carrier. And Chris Goff has been testing 2 of the latest releases in this growing class.
Volkswagen's Transporter is claimed to be the world's most successful commercial vehicle. After all, it's been going for some 40 years now, and in that time they've built 6.7 million examples. Started life as a microbus version of the familiar old Beetle with a flat-4 air-cooled engine in the back. Since then, the range has blossomed into vans, pickup trucks, people carriers, diesel and 4-wheel drive versions, as well as the motor caravans. But now, VW have decided that it's time for a radical change in the concept of the vehicle and hence its mechanical layout. Well, here it is, the new Transporter and Caravelle range, and it's radically different. They've taken the engine from the back, put it up here at the front, driving the front wheels. Now, of course, that means the driving position is much further back than the old Transporter with the Ultimate in forward control. You're sitting behind the front wheels. But you haven't lost as much space as you would have done in, say, a Renault Espace or a Nissan Prairie, because they put the engine in transversely and they've done a very good job of packaging it at the front here. Of course, that has had an effect on the interior. So let's see just how much difference it's made. Well, the answer is not a great deal. All 3 rows of seats have moved back in the body, and that means the rear seat here is much closer to the back door than the old Transporter, but the load space is deeper because you don't have an engine underneath. All 5 of the passengers in the rear have an armrest. The seats are very comfortable. They've changed the design of this centre module, and it folds down to a coffee table if you're treating it as an executive limousine. The seat itself slots out easily and stows in the back if you want more luggage space, and these seats come out with the removal of 4 bolts. But it's not as flexible as the Renault Espace system, where you can position any seat where you want it in the interior of the vehicle. You can still walk through to the front though. As you pull away, you're immediately aware that this is a much more conventional petrol engine than the old Transporter. They're derived from the Audi range, 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol, 2.5-litre 5-cylinder petrol, and a 5-cylinder diesel. But they've been detuned to suit the Transporter. They deliver their power low down in the mid-range, and they slog away really well. With the weight of the new engines right up front in the nose, the Transporter is much more stable than the old version, especially at speed on motorways when in a crosswind you could find yourself occupying 2 lanes. As you'd expect, the ride in the driving compartment is also much better because you're sitting behind the axle. In the old Transporter, you felt every bump you went over. On the old Transporter, you could slide open the centre windows. Now, on this one, they're fixed. They've given you an extra fan to ventilate the passenger compartment, but certainly my occupants in the back complained of feeling stuffy on long journeys. As you'd expect, the gear change is a great improvement on the old Transporter, where you had a sort of wand that felt as though you were stirring porridge. Now, like all Volkswagens, the new Transporter is very competent, but it does look a bit like a Ford Transit. You have to ask if they've sacrificed some of their individuality. It is a very conventional vehicle. That's certainly not a charge you could see levelled against this vehicle, the new Toyota Previa. It's like a giant egg on wheels, something you'd expect to find on a designer's doodle pad, but they've gone ahead and made it. It's a big vehicle. It's in the same class as the Volkswagen Transporter, and it's quite a lot bigger than Renault's Espace. Inside, the styling is just as unconventional, very space-age looking, deep scallops in front of the driver and passenger, and this very prominent centre binnacle bringing the radio and heater controls within easy reach. Lots of stowage space both in the front and the back of the vehicle. Previa's a full 8-seater compared to the Transporter, although this extra seat does rather restrict access to the interior of the vehicle, but you can push the middle row forward and then all occupants have plenty of leg and head room. And an aspect of the sheer length of the vehicle, there's plenty of luggage space, even with 3 rows of seats. Now, if you need more luggage space, this rear row folds up very neatly against the side of the vehicle. This one does the same, and then you've got an enormous amount of storage area. What you mustn't do when you put it down again is what I did and pull the release. The back flies up and smacks you in the face. Now, the remarkable design of Previa is continued in the mechanical layout. They put the engine between the front seats, but they've laid it on its side, so you really wouldn't know it was there. As you'd expect, with an engine in this position, access is pretty disastrous, a mechanic's nightmare through a tiny little hatch. But it's only intended for reaching the dipstick and refilling the sump after an oil change. All the routine maintenance of checking the levels, including topping up the engine oil reservoir, is done under the bonnet. And that's where you'll find the battery and air filter, but also the alternator and the power steering pump. They're driven by a jack shaft running forward from the engine itself. The old Toyota Space Cruiser had a reputation for excessive understeer and instability under braking. Well, thanks to its mid-engine design, the new Previa has none of those problems. Handling is very safe and secure, although the ride does tend to float a bit over bumps. Braking is now very powerful, but it's a nonsense the UK importers of the Previa have decided not to offer anti-lock brakes even as an option when you can get alloy wheels and a silly spoiler on the rear tailgate. Performance is good thanks to tall gearing and the slippery shape. It does over 112 miles an hour, and 0 to 60 in 11.3 certainly won't leave you at the traffic lights. The gear change, though, is controlled by cables. That's enough to send any former Maxi owner screaming off into the woods. It's a lot better than the dreadful change in the old VW Transporter, but it's certainly not as good as the best Japanese changes. Despite its size and weight, the Previa is an easy vehicle to drive. It feels like a car on the road, the steering is light, and the turning circle isn't at all bad. And in this high driving position, you get a good view of the road. They've certainly cracked the ventilation problem. 3 of the windows in the back are able to hinge open, and the heating and ventilation at the front here is very effective. £18,000, the Previa is actually very good value for money when you stack it up against the opposition. It's got the extra seating capacity over Renault's Espace, and it's also got luggage carrying capacity as well. With this extraordinary shape, it's got tremendous eye appeal. It's much more of a car than just a van with seats inside.
Well, bearing in mind the government's, indeed everyone's concerned about fuel economy, these vehicles do look a bit daft if they spend most of their time with just the driver on board. It's only if they regularly carry 6 or 7 people that the economics begin to look reasonable. Now, another major government concern, of course, is the control of vehicle pollution. And recently they made a tentative step towards cleaner exhausts by proposing a new check to be included in the MOT test. Here's Sue Baker.
In 1960, when Ernie Marples introduced the 10-year test, it covered only brakes, lights and steering, and it was relatively simple to check if they were okay. Since then, it's all become a lot more complicated, and sometime next year the new tests will start measuring the level of carbon monoxide in the exhaust. The proposed limit is 4.5%, but is that too high? And should you trust a garage that tells you you're going to fail on the level of an invisible gas?
Now, of course, most garages are going to carry out this new part of the test perfectly fairly and honestly, but clearly there's even greater scope for unscrupulous garages to find new ways of squeezing yet more money out of the unsuspecting motorist. So just how do you check that your car's okay? Well, you can at least make sure that it's kept in an absolutely tip-top state of tune, for example, by consulting one of the independent tuning companies.
A company like this can come to your home just before your MOT to check the carbon monoxide level is correct, while doing a more comprehensive retune on your engine should you need it, and all for a cost of around £35. That way the car shouldn't fail its MOT on carbon monoxide. But is the 4.5% level too generous?
The 4.5 level is set for vehicles built after 1983, and in my experience and the experience of our engineers, that is far too high. The majority of vehicle manufacturers since 1983 are setting an average level, I must stress an average level, of somewhere near 2.5%. So I think 4.5 is far too generous indeed.
The actual test only takes a few moments once the engine is up to temperature. But how will cars with CATs be affected?
In general, the readings obtained from the exhaust system are so low from a catalytically equipped car that there won't even be a consideration.
Indeed, the CO content in this exhaust is virtually zero.
Well, of course, it should be clean. When it was first launched back in April 1988, the Toyota Celica GT4 was the very first car on the British market to be fitted with a standard catalytic converter. So the early examples of these are now coming up for 3 years old, and next spring they'll be going through the MOT test for the first time.
But a catalyst-equipped exhaust is unlikely to give you trouble, even after 3 years hard use.
This exhaust system is already more than 2 years old, and if it were made of ordinary mild steel, like most car exhaust systems are, well, by the time it came up for its first MOT test, it will be starting to rot away and probably need replacing. But it isn't. It's all made of stainless steel, and the catalytic converter up there is encased in stainless steel, so the whole system should be good for 100,000 miles.
After all, there's nothing much to go wrong with it if it's not poisoned by leaded fuel. Any exhaust pollution is likely to be caused by a failure in the engine management system, and on some cars like Volvo's, a warning light tells you as soon as a fault occurs.
This is a brand new catalytic converter. Now, if you have one of these on your car, it's extremely unlikely that it would ever need replacing. But if for some reason it did, it would cost you around £300 to £350 on average to have a new one fitted. Now, it would be reasonable of you to think, this thing's full of precious metals, it's encased in stainless steel, it must have a scrap value. And indeed it has.
The trouble is that the precious metals in the CAT are only worth about £35 in refined form, and the stainless steel about another £25, so the scrap value would be pretty low. They are recycled in some parts of America, but it took 15 years for the industry to get off the ground from the time when all cars were fitted with CATs by law. And even now, they still only offer you $5 for your old exhaust.
Now, there are no plans for making catalytic converters compulsory for motorbikes because they lack the sophisticated engine management systems that are needed. Indeed, converting many of the latest technical developments for motorbikes raises all kinds of problems. Anti-lock brake systems, for example, are still rare. All-wheel drive systems are pretty tricky too. This is the Sunshine development machine we saw briefly at the last motorbike show. Not, of course, a road machine, but then the developments from competition may eventually filter down into conventional motorbikes. Our motocross expert, Vic Allen, took this machine for a test off-road.
To give the two-wheel drive bike a realistic test, we took it to a tough training track on Clee Hill in Shropshire. I started by learning the course on my own British four-stroke PBH with a new single-arm rear suspension system. Heavy rain had left the muddy and rutted circuit in a very tricky condition. In fact, the good low-speed torque of the four-stroke was to prove quite an advantage.
Trouble is, when you ride in the mud, the slower you go, the worse it is. You suddenly have to get a certain amount of speed on. It's very difficult just to hit that happy medium. Got to get power here. Very important to get up this. Let's get the power on the bottom. Really, this is an advantage for four-stroke motocross bikes, this type going. this certainly suits him. It'll be a very nice comparison for when I try the two-wheel drive. Because of the two-stroke of the two-wheel drive, you can compare anywhere with the four-stroke. It's certainly an improvement.
Off-road motorcycling is all about lightness and grip. This two-wheel drive motorcycle should have plenty of grip, but has it got a weight penalty? The drive to the front wheel is started here with the final drive sprocket. It goes up to a clutch which only engages when the back wheel spins. This then takes us to this drive here, across to this side, which goes down to another linkage, which takes us to the front wheel. All this complicated linkage is intended to maintain chain tension as the wheel goes up and down on the suspension. The French Sennett brothers have adopted a different solution on their 2x2 Savate, using centre hub steering. The engineering is clever, but the whole thing's a lot more complicated and could suffer from a poorer lock, a big handicap off the road. And it was off the road that I tried out the 2x2 Sunshine Yamaha. It's the fourth prototype from David Watts and Tony Dennis, and the drive system now works very well. With the front wheel geared 5% slower than the rear, it would have been better suited to sand racing perhaps, but the Shropshire Mud was a fair test of its effectiveness.
This is where it's good. Somewhere we're going very, very slow. You don't have to give too much throttle, get a lot of grip. That's sometimes when you feel a little bit heavy to steer with a two-wheel drive. Right here, it's very difficult to get done, where I could get power on it very early with single-wheel drive. This one drives very good, but the only trouble is, it takes a long time to be able to get it on. Jumps, no problem at all. This bit's tremendous. Braking effect is colossal. This particular bit seems to get too much grip. There's a grab the edge of ruts and want to drive itself out of it instead of just following it round. You can hear the motor, you can really make it pull, and that is certainly a benefit. Very good for enduro riding, through trails, through trees where it's very slow and tricky. This would be superb.
Well, it certainly gets plenty of grip. The problem is, it makes your arms tired. Does it have a future? In the off-road competition market, maybe. But the interesting thing is, does it have a future on the ordinary road bike?
Now, this is the new Formula Junior racing car that will be used here at Jim Russell from next year. It replaces the old Formula 4s that have dominated single-seat training in this sport for the past 20 years. So it provides another possible link between karts, where most drivers spend their early years, and the vastly more expensive, more sophisticated senior machines. So now the possible choice is between Formula 4 with treaded road racing tyres and Formula Junior racing on slicks, before moving on to something like Vauxhall Lotus or Renault or Forward, where the driver also has to cope with the problems of aerodynamics. All in all, it presents the young driver with quite a confusing choice. So to help sort out the differences, we're planning for Tiffany Dell to carry out a group test in the spring series. So if the machinery is in place, what about the drivers? Well, McLaren and Autosport have got together to promote a new award designed to help talented young drivers get to the top.
6 finalists were selected on the basis of their results over the 1990 season in a variety of different championships, from karts to Formula Ford. The judges in this section included former McLaren drivers like James Hunt and John Watson, well able to recognise driving talent, whatever the merits of the machinery being used. A key element in the competition was physical fitness and aptitude, assessed at Billy Dungall's Bio-Training Centre in Austria. A variety of tests were used to measure fitness, recovery rates, concentration and coordination, all emphasising the athletic requirements of today's top drivers. Sheer ability at the wheel was assessed at Silverstone, where each driver was given the chance to try out the sort of car he might next expect to drive, and in exceptional circumstances, the next one up as well. In fact, this year's British Racing Drivers Club Motorcraft champion from Formula Ford, Gareth Rees, came out on top after driving a Vauxhall Lotus and a Formula 3 car.
The overall winner will be announced next month, but there's already been one winner chosen on the basis of his brilliant performance in Formula Ford last season, David Coulthard. Now, as his prize, he's had a test drive in a Formula 3 car. He will have a go in a Formula 1 McLaren. David, how did the Formula 3 drive go?
It went very well. My times were very close to this year's champion, Mika Häkkinen, so I'm looking forward to next year.
Sounds very good. What about Formula 1?
Well, I actually have a test in the McLaren at the end of this year, so I'm looking forward to that very much.
Best of luck. Well, this year David's been driving for the Paul Stewart team in Vauxhall Lotus. Next year he hopes to graduate with the same team to Formula 3, and Paul Stewart himself hopes to move up from Formula 3 to Formula 3000, the prelude to Formula 1. Now, we'd hope to tell you more about this carefully planned staircase for talented drivers devised by Jackie Stewart in an item on his son's racing team. I'm afraid we're unable to, but we hope to return to this theme in the spring series. We turn instead to rallying and the Top Gear Historic Rallying Championship. Chris Goffey took part in the Telford Stages Rally back in the summer.
If Top Gear was to lend its name to the Heritage Rally Championship, it seemed only right that we should do more than simply stand on the sidelines and watch the competitors. At least, that's what they told me in the office. So I found myself back in my racing overalls with an ex-works Mini Clubman to drive in the second round of the championship at Telford's Town Park. We were to start at number 24 from the 60-strong entry list. But in front of me was a fabulous pre-war BMW sports car.
We bought the car to enjoy many years ago now, and well, I'm still enjoying it, you know.
Do you think too many of these things end up locked up in a museum and never see the light of day?
Yeah, well, this normally lives in a museum, but I do like to bring it out.
So the climb in value of something like this hasn't deterred you from sport?
I take it a little easier than I used to be honest, yes.
So if we catch you up on the stage,
I'll
let
let
us
you by.
through.
I'll let you by, yeah, without a doubt.
Thanks very much. This is the time when the butterflies really start flying around your stomach. We're just coming up to the start line for the first stage, and my brave co-driver here is just about to find out how terrible I am at stage rallying. The car, I must say, feels very strong and plenty of power, but it's the first time I've driven it in anger, and just those 20 feet back there, it does seem to move around on the road a lot. And since these roads are so narrow, there's very little room for error. Clutch slips a bit.
Use the right-hand bump. Got it. Oh, struggle this one. That's it. Not this one, next one, next one.
With the limited slip diff pulling the Mini around on the loose, I was finding the car a bit of a handful.
Okay, 90 right here.
And the sharp bends needed a delicate touch on the handbrake.
Something's off, be careful. Keep going, but just watch it.
Car off there. Obviously a Mini got it very badly wrong on the loose. And there's no room for error because there's a big hole in the road. And
90 right here, Chris.
Everybody down a bit. But I wasn't the only one finding myself sideways.
Well, it's very slippy with all these ball bearings all over the place, and we've got rather hard tyres, not these very modern tyres. We scattered a few spectators and ended up pointing down the road we wanted to go, so we didn't lose a lot of time.
People get so much pleasure out of seeing the car that to have a car that's 40 years old, that was, you know, in its day one of the greatest sports cars, winner of Le Mans in 1950, 51 and 52. It seems a pity not to have them out here where people can actually see them.
Well, now, you're hardly wrapping this in cotton wool, are you? We've seen you doing some quite exotic exhibits out there.
Yeah. Well, when you're out there and someone goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's just hit the pedal and you go and you really...
No, that's not true, Trevor. I actually said there's a TV camera up there, and so he then spun it. So just for you.
Ah, right.
Now, a man with an awful lot of horses under the bonnet. Ron, you've got a beautiful Ford Falcon, but it must be a real handful on this tight course.
It's a big handful. It's a bit too big for the narrow roads here, and I've got to try and keep both sides of the car on the road. Normally in my rallying career it's trying to keep one side on the road. But
Now, what's it like to drive? I noticed you wrestling with the wheel out there.
well, I haven't got power steering, and my rally cars for the previous 10 years have had power steering, so I'm wimp here. They've got empty overalls, so I've got to go on a muscle building course.
And it's 5 turns of the wheel, lots a lot.
Five turns of the wheel, and I've only got one end, because the other end I've got to hold it in gear. It jumps out of gear.
But despite that, you're enjoying it?
Yeah, it's great fun.
Fastest on the stage was Tony Dron in an MGB.
This is an exact copy of the 1964 Works Monte Carlo car, down to the little clips on the boot lid and the dash panel, the camshaft, the entire engine specification. It's got about 140 brake horsepower at the flywheel.
Now, what does standard MGB develop?
What's a standard MGB develop? 95.
So you've got a lot more power than a standard car here?
Yes, but what we haven't got is 1990 technology. This is exactly as the Works car 7 DBL went out for the Monte in 1964. Precisely. We had the build sheet from Abingdon, copied it.
A wide range of pre-74 cars take part in the championship, from A90s to the Skodas that did so well for years on the RAC. But of course everyone has a soft spot for the Mini. This is John Brigden's 850 screaming its heart out to the delight of the crowd. And the Morgans were in their element. But soon it was our turn again. With a bit of practice round the stages, we were getting a bit quicker now, and I was getting the hang of the Clubman's handling, its peaky engine and that narrow gear change gate.
Much more impressive.
Beside me, former European historic rally champion Paul Howcroft was occasionally tight-lipped as disaster threatened, but to his credit, he never screamed once.
Very nice.
With its full works, sub-guard, roll cage and rally suspension, I had few qualms about the rough surfaces, but I wondered how owners and drivers of the more valuable machines were able to subject their prized possessions to such violent batterings. I developed a nasty habit of jamming on the fly-off handbrake, which did some of our stage times no good at all. But as the event wore on and the shadows lengthened, we'd slipped only 5 places down the rally order, and on one stage we'd been 14th fastest.
Right here.
Paul, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
A very brave man.
Well,
I thoroughly enjoyed it. What was I doing wrong on this event?
I don't think you did very much wrong at all, Chris. I think you did very well. If you'd been used to the car, if you'd driven it every weekend or every other weekend, I think you would have been 10 seconds around faster easily.
Paul, if you're going to do it again, let me know. I'd love to come along. Well, we didn't finish particularly high up the pecking order, and that was primarily due to driver failure, but it's been a very enjoyable event and an eye-opener as to just how hard these guys tried in their historic rally cars.
Well, the last round of that competition takes place on the 25th of November at Clumber Park in Nottinghamshire, using the same special stage, in fact, as the Lombard RAC. So historic rally cars in the morning, modern-day rally cars in the afternoon. Well, that's all for this week. Next week we bring you a preview of the Lombard RAC Rally and a road test on Honda's new and much acclaimed supercar, the NSX. Tiffany Dell tries it out at Alton Park. See you then. Until then, drive safely. Goodbye.